is all about parents. This is about empowering parents, to make the best decisions for their kids. It's about recognizing that they are the ones in the best position to make that decision. We shouldn't be, assigning kids to a school based on nothing more than a zip code. I mean, that's kind of a silly concept that, might have worked a couple of decades ago. But, these days with all of these new educational options, things like micro schools that just got, became very popular, during the pandemic. With all this innovation in the space that we've seen, it's time that we open this up and let families, make the best decisions for their kids.
I am happy to have back on the program. It's been a little bit since we've chatted with him as from the director of the Education and Workforce Development Task Force from ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. They have released their education freedom rankings on how education looks across the nation, looking at numerous different factors and what we can do to better our public education system around the country. Happy to have on the program Mr. Andrew Handel back with us. Andrew, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on, Andy.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to you. This education freedom ranking is fascinating because I know that education has been really a focal point of conversation for not only election time, but really local communities all over the country after COVID especially. And after we hear Democrat politicians say that parents shouldn't be involved in public education, parents shouldn't be dictating the curriculum for their kids, parents shouldn't be involved in their school with their kids, I think that raised a lot of red flags for parents across the nation, and this has become more of a topic of discussion, and it's about darn time too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, the momentum that we've been seeing for education freedom and, kind of opening up all of these other educational options for parents across the country. It's been absolutely amazing. All 50 states are seeing this movement. It's just been incredible.
Talk about, before we get into some of the actual rankings around the nation, talk about what factors you guys looked at here and how you came to these decisions based on your rank here.
Sure. Yeah, well, we looked at 5 factors. So the first factor that we looked at was financing programs. So that's where your education savings accounts, your tax credit scholarships, those kinds of programs will be factored in there. Basically anything that helps parents pay for school supplies or private school tuition or anything along those lines. The second thing that we looked at was charter schools, and then we looked at virtual schools, homeschooling, and open enrollment, which is your public school choice, essentially. Getting rid of those district boundaries and letting parents pick what public school they want their child to attend. So we looked at all 5 of those categories. We assigned every state a score and a letter grade, and that's how we came up with our rankings.
Regarding the open enrollment, how many states are starting to work on that? I know in Kansas, here where I'm from, we're going to start our open enrollment next year, which some people may not even be aware of, but that did pass in our state legislature last year. Open enrollment kicking off for the 2024-25 school year. I think that's kind of exciting.
Yeah. There's only a handful of states that don't have any form of open enrollment right now. So it's definitely great to see Kansas adding that in. I'm sure that's going to help a lot of families in years to come.
Yeah, when it comes to finance programs, do you include in there some like the school savings accounts or different programs that some have to allow kids to go to, maybe the charter schools, private schools, virtual schooling based on wherever they want to take their kids and those opportunities that states may give them?
We do. Yeah, we do. So, we do count those education savings accounts, as you mentioned, Andy. Those are kind of the gold standard in education freedom. We've seen a number of states getting those policies passed, and not just getting them passed for, not just getting them passed, but getting them passed for all students. Which is the amazing thing to see. These types of policies have been around for a couple of years. But historically, they've been limited. They've been limited to students with special needs or students from low-income households. But we're now starting to see this movement towards, opening this up for all students and saying that, listen, if you like your public school, you can stay in your public school, and that's the parent's choice. But, if there's a nearby private school or a virtual school that a family thinks their student would succeed in at a much higher level, let's give them a little bit of help and, try to make that a reality for them.
Yeah. I've heard an argument from a lot of progressives that despise open enrollment or despise some of the school savings account or despise the competition in the market, just saying that private schools need to stay private, public schools need to stay public, and we need to segregate those two and keep them separate. Why is that? Why do you think that they don't like the competition in the market? Do you think it's because it exposes the failed policies that they've been advocating for? Do they want the discrepancy to try and play the victim card? Like, if you're truly about trying to help as many kids as possible get the best education, why wouldn't you allow or wouldn't want to allow kids to go to whatever school may best benefit them?
That's a great question, Andy. And, I'll tell you, this is all about parents, right? This is all about parents. This is about empowering parents, to make the best decisions for their kids. It's about recognizing that they are the ones in the best position to make that decision. We shouldn't be, assigning kids to a school based on nothing more than a zip code. I mean, that's kind of a silly concept that, might have worked a couple of decades ago. But, these days with all of these new educational options, things like micro schools that just got, became very popular, during the pandemic. With all this innovation in the space that we've seen, it's time that we open this up and let families, make the best decisions for their kids.
What a wild concept, letting parents make that decision on what's best for their children. I don't know why that's so controversial, but for some reason it is in today's times. Let's talk about some of the top five and bottom five states in the nation. For your top five list, which people can go into, by the way, at alec.org and be able to look at this. But the top five states for educational freedom include Florida at number 1, Arkansas number 2, Indiana, Arizona, and Iowa coming up at number 5. Talk about what those states have, especially Florida coming in at that number 1 slot. What put them at that top of the list and why they're so popular?
Yeah, so there's a common theme amongst all those top 5 states, and that's that they have universal education freedom. That means every single child gets to take advantage of, an ESA program, or education savings account program, or a voucher, or a tax credit scholarship, whatever it might be. But those states are also strong. We found they're strong across the board in all 5 of the categories that we looked at. There's really no weaknesses. Each of those states has really, Florida, for example, I think for a long time has been viewed as the gold standard in education freedom. Going back to the days when Jeb Bush was governor there. But there were also some new states there. Arkansas at number 2 and Iowa at number 5. Those are 2 states, Governor Sanders in Arkansas and Governor Reynolds in Iowa. They were really tremendous advocates for universal education freedom this year in their states, and the legislatures responded there. They both got policies passed, and as a result of that, we now see both of those states in the top 5 in our rankings.
That's great news. When it comes to parent involvement, how important is that not only for your guys' ranking here, but just in general for the parents to be involved in not only choosing the schools, but to help their kids after school when they come home, that conversation around the dinner table? Does that have an impact on how these rankings are done and how successful that a school district could be?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andy. Parental involvement is crucial. It's so important not just for these rankings, but to the success of every single child out there. And we really wanted these rankings to be forward-looking. We really wanted to look at seeing how accessible are all these different educational options for families in all of these states, and not just ranking them, but we also want this to serve as a resource for those families to see how does my state look from a charter school perspective, or how difficult is it to homeschool in my state with the regulations that are in place. So we really wanted it to be a resource not just for state lawmakers who are trying to expand access to these different options, but also for families who might say, I'm not sure that our local public school is the best fit for my student, and I'd like to know about what else is out there. So we really wanted it to be a resource for them as well.
Yeah, when you look at some of these and you compare some of these states based on these curriculum that you laid out on how you're doing these rankings, do we also see a comparison that's relatively equal as well and relatively similar to what we're seeing here in parallel when it comes to graduation rates or test scores or how well the students are actually doing in the classroom? I mean, are we seeing that pretty much line up with how the freedom is within that state school system?
Yeah, we are. We're seeing some of those top states in our rankings. They perform very well on the nation's report card. But we actually made a deliberate decision, with this new publication to not look at test scores and graduation rates, because we often see a lot of, there's a lot of changes in those that happen over time, and it's not always easy to pin down exactly what's causing those changes. So Each state might define proficiency in its own way, and they, go about it in their own ways, which is great. But we really wanted to be forward looking, and look at the policies that are going to produce the highest graduation rates down the line, the highest test scores. So that was really our goal with the publication.
Yeah, I love it. Let's take a break here real quick. We're talking with Andrew Handel. He is the director for the Education and Workforce Development Task Force at ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. When we come back, I want to talk about the bottom of the list on what they're doing and what we could be doing to make things better, and talk about some of those other options as parents are looking to take education back into their own hands, and so much more. It's the Voice of Reason. Stay here.
Voice of Reason with Andy Hooser.
Right now, though, we are talking about the educational freedom rankings that were released by ALEC. You can find the list on the website, alec.org, and you can see all the information with the reports here. As we look at the bottom 5 on this list, and I'm kind of surprised by one, not really surprised by the other ones, just by how progressive they like to have dominance with the control of the teachers' unions, control of the government, control of the regulations that they like to impose onto the school districts. And it really makes sense why they would be at the bottom of the rank for freedom, because, well, when government controls more, you get to control less. But the bottom 5 on the list include at number 46, North Dakota, which we'll talk about it, but kind of a surprise to me. Followed by Vermont, New York, Rhode Island, and the worst state for the educational freedom, Massachusetts. All of them very progressive, very deep blue states from the East Coast. Kind of a shocker. But Andrew, talk about why North Dakota is on that list for the bottom 5. That's kind of a shock to me.
Yeah. Well, North Dakota is on there. They scored obviously, very, very low in each of the different categories that we looked at. They actually, the legislature just this year, they passed a small education savings account program. It would have been for students with special needs, but Governor Burgum actually vetoed it. So they still remain at a 0 in that category. Had that bill been signed into law, that obviously would have boosted them in the ranking here. But they scored a 0 on charter schools. They have a lot of homeschooling regulations. So, at each of the different categories that we looked at, it was definitely a surprise. North Dakota has quite a bit of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the bottom one is Massachusetts at number 50. What were some of the biggest flaws that you saw that really popped out to you guys when you did this?
Yeah, the biggest flaws, easily the biggest issue was, these are all states that don't have any kind of funding programs for parents that want to leave their public school. But bigger than that, they don't have other options for parents. These are the states where you are most likely to be tethered to whatever public school you're assigned to based on the zip code. There's probably not going to be other charter schools for you. They make it very difficult for you to homeschool if that's something that you want to do. There's not going to be any virtual school options, and they're not going to let you pick a different public school through an open enrollment policy. So, these are the states where parents have the least access to other educational options, and I think that's reflected in the F grade that we gave them on our rankings here.
We got a lot of work to do. Coming up, as we mentioned, in a couple of months, we have our new legislative sessions for different states all over the nation, and I'm sure this is going to be a focal point for many of them. But what states have you heard from, and what do you think that conversation may look like next year in regards to educational freedom or some type of voucher program or some type of savings account or some type of open enrollment? What do you think's on the docket for next year, and could we see some of these grades bump up a little bit in some of the states?
Yeah, we absolutely could. Oklahoma actually came in 7th in our rankings this year. They passed a universal refundable tax credit, which is really great news for families. That can be used for school supplies and private school tuition and a whole host of different things. Nebraska just got the Opportunity Scholarship Program done, thanks to the leadership of Senator Luann Linehan there. Kansas came very, very, very close to getting a universal education savings account program done. They couldn't quite get it into the budget, but hopefully we'll see lawmakers come back to it next year and try to tack that on. But that would obviously boost them significantly up into the rankings.
Got a lot of work to do and a lot of things on the docket. Hopefully we can see some of those happen. I am so optimistic. Here, living here in Kansas and seeing what they're doing, I am optimistic maybe we can ram that one through this year if we can get some of our other Republican members in our state legislature on board. But that's another conversation for another time. It is Andrew Handel, the Director for the Education and Workforce Development Task Force at ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. Andrew, always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Keep up this great work. We got to get you back on again real soon.
Will do. Thanks for having me on, Andy.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. There it is.